Hi. Yotam, this is Grandpa. Haroon and Blab... Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm Grandma. But maybe I'm Grandpa in disguise. I am wearing his hat. Haroon and Blabbermouth, along with the general, the prince, and the Shah of Blah, went stealthily but sneakily through the thorn bushes to scout out the neighborhood, and after a short time Rashid stopped and pointed without saying a word. There was a small clearing up ahead, and in this leafless glade was a man who looked almost like a shadow, and who held a sword whose blade was dark as night. The man was alone, but turned and leaped and kicked and slashed his sword constantly, as though battling an invisible opponent. Then, as they drew nearer, Haroun saw that the man was actually fighting against his own shadow, which, in turn, was fighting back with equal ferocity, attention, and skill. "Look," whispered Haroun, "the shadow's movements don't match the man's." Rashid silenced him with a glance. But what he had said was the truth. The shadow plainly possessed a will of its own. It dodged and ducked. It stretched itself out until it was as long as a shadow cast by the last rays of the setting sun. And then it bunched itself as tight as a shade at noon. When the sun is directly overhead, that is, when the sun is directly overhead, the shade under a tree is black. Its sword lengthened and shrank, its body twisted and altered constantly. How could one ever hope to defeat such an opponent, wondered Haroun. The shadow was attached to the warrior at the feet, but other than that seemed to be entirely free. It was as though its life in a land of darkness, of being a shadow concealed in shadows, had given it powers undreamt of by the shadows of a conventionally lit world. It was an awesome sight. The warrior was a striking figure, too. His long, sleek hair hung to his waist in a thick ponytail. His face was painted green, with scarlet lips, exaggerated black brows and eyes, and white stripes on his cheeks. His bulky battle dress of leather guards and thick thigh and shoulder pads made him seem even larger than he truly was, and his athleticism and swordsmanship were beyond anything Haroun had ever seen. No matter what tricks his shadow played, the warrior was its equal. And as they fought each other, standing toe to toe, Haroun began to think of their combat as a dance of great beauty and grace. A dance danced in perfect silence because the music was playing inside the dancers' heads. Then he glimpsed the warrior's eyes, and a chill struck at his heart. What terrifying eyes they were! Instead of whites, they had blacks, and the irises were gray as twilight, and the pupils, which is usually the black part, were white as milk. No wonder the Chupwallas like the dark, Haroun understood. They must be blind as bats in the sunlight because their eyes are the wrong way around, like a film negative that somebody forgot to print. As he watched the Shadow Warrior's martial dance, that's its warlike dance, Haroun thought about this strange adventure in which he had become involved. How many opposites are at war in this battle between Gup and Chup, he marveled. Gup is bright, and Chup is dark. Gup is warm, and Chup is freezing cold. Gup is all chattering and noise, whereas Chup is silent as a shadow. Guppies love the ocean. Chupwallas try to poison it. Guppies love stories and speech. Chupwallas, it seems, hate these things just as strongly. It was a war between love of the ocean, or of the princess, and death, which was what Cult Master Katam Shud had in mind for the ocean and for the princess, too. But it's not as simple as that, he told himself, because the dance of the Shadow Warrior showed him that silence had its own grace and beauty, just as speech could be graceless and ugly, and that action could be as noble as words, and that creatures of darkness could be as lovely as the children of the light. If guppies and chupwallas didn't hate each other so, he thought, they might actually find each other pretty interesting. Opposites attract, as they say. Just at that moment, the shadow warrior stiffened, turned his strange eyes upon the bush behind which the guppy party was hiding, and then sent his shadow stretching out towards them. It reared up over them, holding its immensely elongated sword. The shadow warrior, sheathing his sword, which had no effect on the shadow, walked slowly over to their hiding place. His hands were moving furiously in something like a dance of rage or hate. Faster and faster, more and more emphatic grew his hand movements, and then, in what might have been disgust, he let his hands drop and began, horror of horrors, to speak. This is Chapter 8, Shadow Warriors. The effort of producing sounds twisted the Shadow Warrior's already striking face, green skin, scarlet lips, white striped cheeks, etc., into dreadful, contorted shapes. Go, 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 he gurgled. He called. Eh? What's that? What's the fellow saying? Demanded Prince Bolo loudly. Can't make out a single word. What a poser, I swear, Blabbermouth hissed at Haroun. Our Bolo, talking so big and rude because he thinks it'll stop us from noticing that he's scared out of his pants. Haroun wondered why Blabbermouth remained in Prince Bolo's service when she had such a low opinion of the gentleman, but he kept his mouth shut, partly because he didn't want her to say something cutting and scornful to him, partly because he had started to like her a good deal, which made any opinion of hers okay with him, but mostly because there was a giant shadow with a huge sword looming over them, and a warrior grunting and spitting at them from a few feet away, and in short, this was no time for chit-chat. If, as it is said, people in the land of Chuck hardly talk at all these days because of the cult master's decrees, then it's not surprising that this warrior has temporarily lost control of his voice, Rashid Khalifa was explaining to Prince Bolo, who was unimpressed. It's too bad, he said, really. Why people can't speak properly, it beats me. The shadow warrior, oh, wait a minute, something wrong. Try to reconnect. Meyer?
No, you're wrong. Just push the button. The picture disappeared. That's all. Oh. Something went wrong, Freddy.